I came upon 3 horrifying tales in which nightmares came true. It was wrong of me to open that door. It was just another night, another typical horror movie marathon with pals, I assured myself. However, I discovered something much worse than fiction. It all began with those hushed, icy murmurs that crept through the night. The shadows appeared to be alive, but I felt alone. As I moved down the dark hallway, the air heavy with a chilling fear, my chest constricted. The walls were damaged and peeling, painted a shade of despair. As though it were a live thing keeping its secrets, I could practically hear the house breathing. I glanced at the old porcelain doll on the shelf. Its empty eyes seemed to follow me. I shuddered, a chill prickling my skin. My phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. A friend texted about a story they heard, a child's drawing that foretold a tragedy. I laughed, the sound hollow in the oppressive air. But then it hit me. What if nightmares could leap off the page? The thoughts snagged on something deep inside me. I shook it off. I had to focus on the movie, but still those whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a cold wind. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the living room. I froze. There it was again. My heart raced, a drum in a ghostly silence. I moved slowly, every creak of the floorboard sounding like a scream. I pushed the door open a fraction, peering into the room. Everything looked normal, too quiet. But the atmosphere shifted. A flicker of movement caught my eye, the small wooden box we had placed on the table. It slowly slid across the surface, leaving a faint scratch against the wood. I gasped, struggling to breathe. I wanted to run to scream, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Could it be the stories, the nightmares? I could feel panic rising like bile. I could almost hear it whispering, the malevolence crawling just outside my consciousness. Then a cold breeze brushed past me, and the lights flickered. My breath caught. I couldn't identify the shapes that the shadows seemed to take as they twisted and warped. With my heart beating so loudly that it drowned all my thoughts, I took a step back. What was going on? Something forced me to stay even though I needed to go. Then I saw it in that flickering darkness. At the edge of the light, a tall, dark, looming figure. What was it seeking? The seconds seemed to go for forever, but a scream rose up from my throat. Though my thoughts was racing, I was immobile. I was having trouble breathing. I was immobilized, trapped in a nightmare from which I could not awaken. Hey, I need to give you a crucial heads up before we continue this incredible tale. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments which city are you watching from. I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure shifted, a silhouette against the dim light that seemed to warble like a flame caught in the wind. My heart thundered, but the oppressive atmosphere held me hostage, grounding me to the spot. Its shape elongated, melting into the shadows, creeping along the floor like fingers seeking solace. I strained to catch a glimpse of its face, but all I could discern were its hollow eyes, 2 voids that promised an eternity of torment. Before I could process my fear, the whispers around me intensified. Now a cacophony of voices thrumming like dark melodies, echoing tales of loss, despair, and horror. I felt them wash over me, lingering in my throat like a bad taste. I thought I could discern words among the whispers, names, dates, funeral processions. Each fragment clamored for attention, clawing at my mind, seeking release. Instinct kicked in, and I stumbled backward, colliding with the wooden console table. Framed photos toppled over, shattering the fragile silence as glass splintered against the floor. In that moment of chaos, as I knelt to grasp the pieces, I caught a chilling glimpse of something written on the backs of the photographs. They bore jarring reminders. A little girl in a blue dress, her face obscured by the darkness. An inscription that sent icy fingers down my spine. Never let them in. The light flickered once more, and I could feel the dread writhe in my gut, twisting my insides like a fist. I rose abruptly, but my legs felt like weights, barely lifting me off the floor. That figure hadn't moved. It merely stood there watching, observing. Time stretched. I could feel its breath on my neck, cold and unyielding. For a heartbeat, fear gave way to confusion. Was this real, or a nightmare birthed from my flickering sanity? Then a laugh echoed across the room. A child's laugh, bright and hollow, swirling around me like a ghostly wind. It resonated with the joy meant to be paired with innocence, but twisted into something sinister and wrong. I whirled toward the sound, my pulse quickening. A flicker of movement drew my attention to the corner of the room. A small boy stood there, a dusty teddy bear clutched in his hand, his face pale, eyes wide with an unearthly light. "Help me," he said, his voice sweet yet drenched in sorrow. "He wants me to play." The figure shifted again, now seeming more definitely. The child's laughter morphed into manic giggles that scraped against my ears. "Playtime, playtime," he chanted, his voice weaving into a menacing melody that resonated in my bones. "Don't," I cried, my voice barely a whisper. But the words were lost to the throbbing den. I stepped forward, propelled by a desperate urge to save him from whatever terror awaited. But as I did, the boy faded, his form blurring into the shadows, leaving behind only that sinister laughter echoing against the walls. That I turned back to the figure, a primal instinct clawing at me. It took a step forward, the shadows pooling at its feet like a dark puddle. I felt something shift in the air, a thick, suffocating fog that settled low to the ground, wrapping around my ankles. The whispers now coalesced into a single voice, one I recognized deep down in my marrow. "Join us." Panic surged through me as dread settled like lead in my chest. I backed away again, desperately scanning the room for an escape. The wall seemed to close in, breathing with a heavy rhythm. And just as I thought I had spotted a door, the floorboards beneath me groaned ominously. Before I could reach for it, I felt a dark current rushing through the air, coiling around my throat and pulling me down. I gasped, struggling to breathe, and then silence swallowed the room. The lights plunged into darkness and that terrifying void. I felt something cold touch my cheek, brushing against my skin with the promise of despair. Then a voice licked through the darkness. No longer a whisper, but a scream, "Don't let them in." The sound cracked like thunder in my mind, shattering whatever veil held the nightmare at bay. An unseen force yanked me down into the dark, my world spiraling away as the grip tightened. Then everything went black, and just before the abyss swallowed me whole, I heard a giggle, bright and innocent, echoing in the void where nothing should exist. I awoke on damp earth, the air thick and heavy around me, clinging to my skin like a second layer of dread. I pushed myself up, fingers trembling as they touched the cold, unyielding ground. The scent of decay permeated the atmosphere, swirling with hints of mold and wet foliage, suffocating in its rancid embrace. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but as they opened to the muted gray, annoying realization sank into my gut. I was no longer in my home. The shadows loomed larger than life, swirling in a morbid dance, twisting and writhing amongst gnarled trees that reached out like skeletal fingers. The sky blotted with clouds heavy and low, dimmed the waning light, leaving only a sickly glow to filter through. Panic swept through me as I clutched at the damp earth beneath my fingers, my heart racing. Had I been dragged to another realm entirely? The howling wind carried with it whispers, familiar voices, taunting and pleading, a cacophony of sorrow. I struggled to make sense of it, but the memories became mere shadows as another scream pierced the air. A scream that seemed stitched together from fragments of my own thoughts. "Don't let them in, don't let them in." But what was them? Instinctively, my eyes scanned for the figure, expecting it to emerge from the haze of despair. Every heartbeat seemed to echo like a countdown, an impending doom. The child's laughter nodded at the edges of my sanity, shattering the fragile clarity I had clung to. I stumbled to my feet, driven by a primal need to escape. As I turned, the gnarled branches of trees seemed to slither towards me, twisting and curling as if warning me of some unspeakable threat. I felt their cold breath brushing against the back of my neck, and the hair on my arm stood erect. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. In the distance, a flicker of light caught my eye. Something had to be near a way out, or at the very least, a glimpse of sanity. I dashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at my clothes, pulling me back, but I fought against them, driven by sheer desperation. With every step, I could hear the whispers intensifying, weaving in and out of my consciousness. "Join us, join the game." They slithered through the air, wrapping around my thoughts, suffocating my hope. I shook my head violently, battling against the maelstrom of voices that sought to drag me under, using every ounce of strength clawing up from the abyss of fear. Closer, the light flickered like a beacon. I dove through the brambles, gasping as I broke free, suddenly thrust into an open clearing dominated by a single old oak tree. Its branches reached out like arms prepared to embrace. At its base squatted an imposing figure etched in shadow yet illuminated by a single candle flickering on the ground before its. I took a step forward. The candle extinguished with a gust that seemed to come from nowhere. Darkness engulfed me, suffocating and thick. And then I heard a familiar giggle, soft and inviting, but laden with terrible undertones. I found you. My spine turned to ice as I turned to see the small boy from before, his eyes now shimmering with a predatory gleam. The teddy bear hung loosely in his grip, its button eyes glistening with malice. There was a new presence beside him, barely defined against the shadow ethereal figure that flickered in and out of focus, its outline boiling like a stew of darkness. Time to play, the boy said, his smile stretching unnaturally wide, revealing teeth too sharp, too perfect. And then the whispers erupted. Not just a couple of voices, but the Sansa chorus of torment. Trapped souls pleading for salvation, clawing at the air around me. I was caught in the center of it all. Unable to wrestle my breath back, I stumbled backward, only to feel a gnarled root coil around my ankle, pulling me down. I screamed, but the laughter of the boy drowned out my own voice as I tumbled into the earth, swallowed whole by darkness. I felt something slither beneath my skin, burrowing deeper with every beat of my heart, promising to shatter my sanity with every pulse. Just as everything went TT, a blinding flash erupted in the void, illuminating a horrifying sight. Faces twisted and tortured, encroaching on my reality as they reached out for me. "Get in line," they screamed, pulling the shadows tighter around me, dragging me toward a fate that felt inevitable. And then through the chaos came the boy's sing-song voice. "You wanted to play, didn't you?" The ground beneath me began to split, darkness yawning wide, threatening to swallow me whole as the screams crescendoed into a deafening roar. Just as I thought I'd find some form of respite, something cold and slick slid up my arm, tracing a chilling pattern, tightening its grip. It pulled me toward the darkness, whispering promises of eternal play. And with one last terrified gasp, I was yanked into the abyss. The shadows pressing in from all sides, the laughter resonating around me, shattering my very existence. I fell through the abyss, the darkness suffocating me. It clawed at my mind, dragging my thoughts into an ocean of despair where no light could survive. I could feel the cold tendrils of something ancient wrapping around my body, whispering secrets of unearthly horrors that had witnessed eon of suffering. I was no longer alone, never meant to be. The darkness was alive, a sentient void, eager to unveil its terrors. Just as suddenly as it began, the descent halted. I landed hard against a surface that felt wrong, too smooth, too alive. A slithering sensation coursed through my veins, and panic surged as I realized I was sprawled across a mass of sinewy flesh. My limbs felt strangely fused to the membrane beneath me, pulsating alongside some monstrous heartbeat that thrummed with malevolent glee. Instinctively, I fought against the entangling masses, but they tightened their grip, drawing me into a grotesque embrace. The howling whispers returned, reverberating off unseen walls, the cacophony swelling until it was impossible to discern individual sounds. Each murmur ripped at my sanity, threading my fears and regrets together into an unholy tapestry that enveloped me. "Find the warmth will set you free," they lured, seductive and sinister, their tones weaving an intoxicating melody that promised salvation. I could sense them gathering, unseen eyes raking across my skin, eager for a glimpse of my unraveling. My heart raced in my chest, blood pounding as I clawed wildly against the surface that sought to claim me. There, in the depths, the light flickered back into existence. It was blue and shimmering, casting a sickly glow that illuminated grotesque shapes skittering just beyond my reach. They weren't entirely human. They crawled and slithered, twisted and malformed, their features grotesque parodies of life. Some moved on all fours, while others shambled upright with limbs bent at unnatural angles, their eyes glowing with a ghastly hunger that I had to escape. The blue light pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing me towards it, promising respite. I heaved, using the last reserves of strength in my limbs to push away from the quivering mass, splattering thick, dark ichor across my skin as I writhed free. The black tendrils recoiled, hissing like venomous snakes as they released their hold. I stumbled awkwardly toward the beckoning glow, feeling their seething resentment radiate against my back. As I approached the light, a familiar voice pierced the air, a sing-song melody that was both lullaby and lament. "You can't leave yet," it echoed, dripping with malice, filled with the twisted joy of a child at play. It was the boy, his form flickering in and out of the dark like a candle in a storm. He stepped forward, holding the teddy bear in front of him, its once innocent form now splattered with a darkness that seemed to breathe. "You have to stay with us. The game is just beginning." I gasped, legs trembling as I shoved through, feeling the light envelop me but break apart around his laughter. I need to get out. I lunged, reaching for the shimmering glow, hoping desperately for escape. But the boy was faster, stepping effortlessly as if he danced among the shadows. But you promised, he taunted, and the ground beneath me quacked, shifting as the very essence of the world began to distort. The light dimmed, flickering erratically like the last breath of a dying star. And I felt my pulse quicken, adrenaline coursing as I plunged forward, a single thought anchoring my survival. The darkness writhed, shapes shifting, and from behind them emerged figures I recognized. Twisted reflections of those I had loved and lost, faces marked with despair and pleading eyes that callously beckoned me, mouths moving soundlessly in a grim parody of comfort. Join us, they coaxed, as if their wailing had birthed a phantom voice that resonated in my soul, making me question whom I should trust. And then the shadows surged forward, clawing at my skin with desperate longing, as walls of flesh closed in from either side, making the space feel less like an escape and more like an impending tomb. You belong with us, they rasped, filling the air with an icy dread, making my skin crawl with their phantom touch. But in that moment of despair, something shattered within me wasn't going to succumb without a fight. I bellowed, drawing on every ounce of strength and surged toward the remaining light. No, I screamed, a raw desperation erupting from the very core of my being, feeling the flicker of hope surge before me. And for a moment, the shadows hesitated, their grip loosening that I lunged. The moment I reached out for the shimmer, I grasped at reality with both hands. A final draw against the chaos that threatened to consume me just as my fingertips brushed against the pulsating light. The ground beneath me erupted, fragments of darkness rocketing upward as I was hurled backward. I screamed again, now fully consumed by shadows that greeted me with open arms, laughter echoing in a chilling symphony, the boy's voice weaving into the chaos. Time's up, the game has truly begun. In that unending moment, I felt myself sliding once more into the void, this time accompanied by the echo of familiar moans and laughter. A new horror hung just out of sight, clamoring to take its place in the dark. As I was dragged once more into the abyss, I heard a whisper behind me that froze my blood. Welcome home. Then everything fell silent, the void spit me out and I tumbled onto rough concrete, gasping for breath as the air whipped past. I still felt the remnants of the darkness clinging to my skin. A cold dew that felt like the remnants of a coffin. Beneath the blaring sunlight, I squinted and took a moment to gather my thoughts. The world around me was strangely still, as if I had momentarily emerged from an unending nightmare, only to slump back into a dream from which I struggled to awaken. Slowly, I rose to my feet, disoriented in a place that felt both familiar and alien. The air was pungent with the smell of decay, something rotting just out of sight. I took cautious steps forward, the echo of my footfalls mingling with whispers that seemed to travel down the alley behind me, beckoning me with a phantom familiarity. Shadows crept along the corners of my vision, flickering furtively, and I fought against the urge to look back. The boy's laughter still rang in my ears, echoing like a taunt, and I realized that the darkness was not finished with me yet. It lingered in every corner of my mind, twisting my fears into something tangible. I pushed the sensation aside. I had escaped, but had I truly? I stepped out of the alley and into the main street where a blaring neon sign flickered overhead. It read, "Carnival of Nightmares," vibrant against the muted backdrop of flesh and bone. My heart sank. Just beyond the gate, laughter erupted from unseen patrons, and brightly painted faces danced amidst swirling colors. A grotesque menagerie of attractions stretched before me, with tents that looked alive swelling and shifting as they breathed. That I clutched the edges of my shirt, torn between disgust and undeniable curiosity. The carnival, it felt like a summons. The boy had pulled me back into this realm, a realm where nightmares thrived amongst laughter. A swell of dread washed over me, reminding me of the shadows clinging to the corners of my vision. As I approached, I could hear the calls of the barkers enticing the onlookers. Step right up, face your fears, simple pleasures await. Each syllable dripped with a sinister undertone that made my stomach churn. The nightmares are real, come taste the sensation. Beneath the carnival's chaos, I sensed an undercurrent of something horrific. The sound of whispers breaking like waves upon the shore of my consciousness. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling the weight of summer sweat trickling down my spine. A moth-eaten clown, mouth stretched wide in an unnatural grin, caught my eye. He beckoned with twisted fingers, and as I neared, his laughter turned hollow, an echo of a time long forgotten. "Welcome, are you ready to find the truth?" I flinched. The boy's voice was muffled, but his laughter still wove through the clown's words as though he were pulling the strings on a puppet. The truth? There's no truth here, I shouted back, voice trembling, but deep down I knew it was a lie. A fragile facade masking the reality I desperately didn't want to face. I turned to run, heart racing as I fled into the carnival. Darkness, with its moist reach, seemed to whisper encouragement as shadows coiled eagerly around the attractions. The merry-go-round gleamed in a sinister light, its painted horses appearing to leap with nervous energy. I ran past, forced myself to swallow the bile that rose in my throat at the sight. Suddenly, a cacophony erupted from a tent nearby. A figure stumbled out, shrieking, and as I drew close, my breath caught in my throat. It was a reflection of myself, twisted and distorted with pitch-black eyes, grinning widely as it stumbled over the uneven ground. "Why don't you join us?" My doppelganger cackled, a sound that made my bones ache. "Come taste the nightmares. They can be delicious." I turned on my heel, propelled by fear, pushing the terming of dread from my mind as I plunged deeper into the heart of the carnival. I needed to find a way out, I told myself. Once more, the echo of the boy's laughter rippled through the air, settling into an oppressive silence that swallowed the sounds of the carnival. Frantically searching for a means of escape, I approached a tent marked Carnival of Souls. My instincts screamed to run, yet my feet seemed to pull me in. I could feel the tendrils of darkness whispering sweet nothings, filling me with an unbearable curiosity and dread. With a deep breath, I pushed through the curtain and was bathed in an eerie luminosity. The space before me was filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of myself, some horrifyingly distorted, some utterly joyous, their lips curling in sinister delight even as their eyes radiated despair. But suddenly a new reflection emerged. I froze, breath hitching in my throat. It was the boy again, stretching out his tiny hand towards me, his countenance sweet yet chilling. "You're late," he said, pouting as the mirrors around us trembled, distorting his image into 1,000 hideous grins. The light began to dim around me, shadows swirling as a low murmur of unearthly laughter spread through the air, twisting all that was left of reality. My heart raced. I needed to run, but my feet seemed glued to the ground. Then the mirrors shattered, a sharp, piercing sound that sent shards flying like shards of dark fate. The boy's expression morphed into pure malice, eyes glowing like 2 points of inferno. His voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. "You'll stay here forever with all of us." And in that moment, as the fragments of glass began to twist and writhe like serpents eager to bite, I realized I had made the worst choice. I had stepped into the den of nightmares, and they were ready to feast. Before I could escape, the boy's laughter enveloped me, echoing through the chaos, and I felt myself spiraling down once again into the void, this time much deeper, a place where only fears could survive. The last thing I heard before plunging into the abyss was a chilling whisper that sliced through the darkness like a cold wind. "Welcome home forever." As I plummeted into the abyss, an unbearable weight pressed down on my chest, constricting my breath until each gasp sharpened into a blade of terror. It felt as though the darkness was swallowing me whole, wrapping around my limbs, squeezing tighter with every second I spiraled deeper. I could scarcely think, only feel the pulse of fear, the aching despair of hopelessness, and the intoxicating scent of decay that still clung to the back of my throat. The fall seemed endless, each second stretching into a void where time lost its meaning. Whispers filled the air, soft, coaxing voices that twined around my digits, stroking my mind with their malevolent lullabies. They were familiar, echoing the boy's laughter, but warped into something more grotesque, more sinister. Finally, with a bone-jarring thud, I landed sprawled on cold, damp earth. I cried out, a strangled noise escaping my lips as I scrambled to my feet, disoriented and overwhelmed. I was in a cavern, the walls slick with a glossy film that shimmered in the dim light. It felt like being inside a throat, pulsing with a life of its own. The sound of water dripped rhythmically like a heartbeat, setting my nerves further on edge. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and dread began to slowly fester in my gut as I saw them horrors slumbering against the cavern walls, grotesque half-formed shapes that writhed slightly as if my presence alone stirred them from their slumber. Their eyes, vacant yet hungry, glinted with a malicious hunger that anchored itself deep within my psyche, creeping inwards, as if vying for a chance to consume what remained of my sanity. Then came the sound, the unmistakable patter of tiny footsteps skittering across the stony floor. My heart thundered as I turned, breath catching in my throat again. Out of the shadows emerged the boy, his form illuminated by a bizarre, flickering light that felt like fire and ice in equal measure. His grin widened impossibly, the sharpness of his teeth glinting menacingly as he regarded me with glee. "Did you miss me?" he chirped, his tone layered with childish delight, yet dripping in menace. "We have such delights to show you." "Delights," I spat, rage fueling my voice, a futile shield against the fear that clawed at my insides. "What is this place?" "This is where they come to play," he sang, twirling in glee, his laughter echoing groat squally off the cavern walls. "The night terrors, the true nightmares. Here you'll find pieces of yourself, lost and forgotten." As he spoke, the shadows quivered, and the horrifying forms began to detach themselves from the cave walls, slithering closer. Each of them took on features that resembled me, a painful reflection of my past fears, my failures, the traumas I thought to have buried. They wore my pain like a shroud, leaking despair with every breath they took. "Join us," the boy urged, eyes gleaming like dark stars. "Become one with your nightmares. Isn't it exciting?" "No," I shouted, taking a step back, my feet slipping on the slick rock. The cacophony of their laughter and whispers intensified, vibrating in my bones. Panic surged through me, a desperate longing for escape. And then, as if sensing my turmoil, they lunged. DMY instincts kicked in, and I sprinted deeper into the cavern, desperate to flee from the clamoring horde. The slick walls pressed in on me, shadows clawing at my back as the boy's laughter echoed with abandon behind me, so cruelly jubilant. "You can't escape who you are," he jeered ahead. A faint glow pulsed like a beacon, drawing me closer. Hope surged within me, blinding against the darkness. I barreled towards it, praying it would lead to salvation. But as I closed the distance, the glow morphed into something horrific. A portal torn in the fabric of reality, swirling with malevolent energy that seemed eager to reach out and gnaw at my very essence. Outside the portal, figures loomed, more of the night terrors, each one brimming with malicious joy as they reached for me with gnarled hands. "Come back," they cooed in unison. "You belong here." That I hurled myself forward, willing my body to leap through the rift. Just as I reached the threshold, a pair of cold fingers grabbed my wrist, yanking me back with agonizing strength. I screamed in horror as I felt tendrils writhing up my body, wrapping around my limbs, pulsing with the rhythm of the world's darkest heart. The boy's face floated before me, now savage, his eyes impossibly wide. "You're not getting away. You're part of us now," he shrieked, a grotesque blend of childlike joy and fervent malevolence that I kicked, my mind racing. The portal sang to miss sweet promises of escape. Yet every ounce of fear in my bones warned it was merely bait. And in that final strained moment, the grasp of the darkness tightened, squeezing my last remnants of hope from my heart. Then the cavern trembled, a loud crack reverberated against the walls, sending chips of stone raining down. I glanced back at the portal, wondering if it offered a fleeting chance for freedom or if I would be damned to the carnival of nightmares for eternity. As I wrestled against the dark hands pulling at me, the cave began to implode. A cacophony of shrieks filling the army's own voice mingling with the wails of the darkness. With a final push, I blurted the words that echoed deep in my heart, my last shred of resistance bursting forth. "I will not be yours." And then everything shattered. I felt the ground beneath me splitting apart as I was yanked in two different directions, the boy's laughter echoing as the night terrors lunged. In that moment of torment, between the approaching end and a glimpse of hope, I was left with one haunting question. In my struggle to escape, had I become the nightmare? The cavern erupted around me, swallowing everything into oblivion as the boundaries of reality blurred, leaving me teetering on the brink of the void once more, poised to free fall into a deeper madness as sinister hands surged to drag me under. The sensation of free fall vanished abruptly when I collided against something solid. The impact filled my lungs with air, a cold shock coursing through my body, and for a moment, I lay on a hard surface, breathless. Adrenaline surged as I pushed myself upright, confusion flooding my senses. My surroundings shifted dramatically as shadows melted into a hazy twilight. I was no longer in the cavern. I blinked hard, taking in my new environment, a deserted street lined with dilapidated houses that leaned precariously as if they might collapse any moment. An invisible weight hung in the air, thick and oppressive, like a fog of anxiety that made it hard to breathe. The low hum of deep thrum echoed around me, vibrating within my chest, suffocatingly familiar. "Help me," a voice whispered, drifting on the chilling wind. It could have been a plea or perhaps a cruel trick of my mind. I turned, heart racing, scanning for the source. My steps echoed in the eerie silence, each footfall sounding like a gunshot in my ears. A sense of déjà vu washed over me. Had I walked this road before? Had I been trapped in this nightmare sphere, learning its shadowy paths only to forget them again? The whisper returned, now repeating a name. Henry. It faded like smoke, leaving behind a tugging sensation that twisted at my gut. A child's laughter erupted nearby, slicing through the stillness. My instincts flared. This place felt wrong. A distorted mirror of my forgotten memories mingled with shadow. I pressed forward, hesitant, but driven by a yearning I couldn't grasp. The houses watched me with empty, sinister eyes, their windows like gaping maws, threatening to engulf me the instant I strayed too close. As I approached the nearest one, the door creaked open on its own, an invitation woven with dread. Come play with us. An echoing chorus of childlike voices chimed from within the darkness, a sound so sweetly uninviting it curdled my stomach. Where are you? I called, driven by desperation. The voices squealed with delight, elongating and intertwining as they danced in the air. Come find us. I bolted through the doorway, heart pounding as terror gripped my core. The interior of the house was a tableau of decay, the wallpaper peeling and curling away like the fragile veil of reality. Shadows flickered along the walls, twisting into forms I recognized all too well, blurred memories from my childhood. But they were more sinister, tainted with a darkness that had transformed innocence into loathing. In the corner of the room, a dusty old mirror reflected a child staring back at me with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. My breath hitched as I realized it was me. Not the version I remembered, but a warped, twisted reflection of my fear, my guilt, my disillusionment. You brought me here, I breathed, steps faltering as the world tilted. Suddenly, a flurry of shadows darted past me, a whirlwind of chaos that sent me spinning. I spun around, eyes wide as laughter erupted, echoing with an intensity that felt alien. Playtime, they sang, shrieks layering over one another with a harmonic insanity. In confusion, I stumbled back through the door, returning to the street just in time to see dozens of figures erupting from the shadows of the houses. Children, oh, not children, creatures formed of darkness, their tiny forms exaggerated, eyes glimmering with malevolence. They twirled and danced on the streets, wrapping their laughter around me like a rope. Join us, they screeched, their bodies flickering in and out of the twilight, mouths opening impossibly wide. Panic surged within me, but I turned, forcing my legs to sprint down the street. As I fled, glimpses of the girl I once was tore through my mind. Memories of lost innocence and joy twisted into this living nightmare that beckoned me to return. Henry, the voices called, entreating, inviting. Don't you remember? We made a deal. What deal? I screamed, refusing to look back, feeling the tug of their insistent pull. My lungs burned, yet I couldn't fail again. I wouldn't let them take me back. I pushed harder, the world around me, warping as I raced toward the end of the street, where the shadows converged into an impenetrable wall. But as I reached the edge, the earth trembled. Something stirred behind me, a tide of darkness swelling, and I hesitated, heart racing. The shadows closed, forming the figure of the boy once more, his grin wide, eyes glinting with terrifying glee. You think you can run? He taunted, his voice rising above the clamoring laughter that filled the air. The deal is already sealed. With frantic urgency, I turned to face the darkness again. Beyond the wall, I could see light dazzling in its distance. Hope sparked anew, but the boy's laughter echoed, and the darkness rolled closer, pulling at my feet, pulling me down into a shapeless void, threatening to drown me once again. Join us, Henry, they screamed as they flooded towards me, faces merging, grinning with manic delight. The very ground rattled beneath me, the luminescent light shining with a growing urgency, urging me to leap. And then I saw a glimpse of what could be a chance at liberation. But the shadows were already coiling around my ankles, a sinister embrace squeezing tighter with every breath. Desperation seized me, and I leapt toward the realm of light. A final scream echoing against the churning chaos. But as I soared, the shadows lunged once more, and in the split second between light and dark, I was left with a chilling, haunting realization. Sometimes darkness comes not from chasing the light, but from realizing it has never existed at all. And in that moment, as the world erupted into brilliance and screams echoed behind me, I felt the pull of my own nightmares embracing me once more, leaving me wondering if I had truly escaped or if this was the beginning of something far worse. The moment I landed on the other side, I felt a jolt of disorienting energy ripple through me. I was no longer on that haunted street, but in a surreal twilight realm, suspended between breaths, thick with an air of tangible dread. Glittering fragments of shadow glided around me, whispering secrets I couldn't quite decode. The light that had shone promisingly now felt hollow, too bright, and too close, etching my fears into clarity that I stumbled forward, the ground shifting beneath my feet as the terrain morphed into a warped landscape of twisted trees and broken paths. An oppressive silence fell heavy, pressing against my ears like a physical force, until it was shattered by that same disembodied cry echoing through the air. Help me, Henry. My resolve hardened, the instinct to turn back, clashing with a frantic urge to push ahead. I had to understand the truth behind these shadows, behind my childhood memories that now taunted me. The cry grew stronger, wrapping around me like a noose. Am lost. Driven by a mix of desperation and fear, I hurried down a precarious path lined with limbs protruding like skeletal fingers, scratching at my skin, begging to pull me back. Each step reverberated with the echoes of laughter, deceivers' laughter. The shadows behind me writhed, flickering at the edge of my vision whenever I dared to glance back, forming strange shapes that mirrored my own once familiar fears. Why did you leave me? The voice continued to wail, slashing through my mind like a shard of glass. You were supposed to protect me. I clutched my head, staggering beneath the weight of memories, feelings clawing their way back through the fog of forgetfulness. An image surfaced: winter day, a yellowed park bench, the thrill of child's laughter echoing over the sound of crunching leaves beneath my feet. I squeezed my eyes shut, battling the vision that surged forward, threatening to consume me. The boy with hollow eyes buried beneath the snow, still smiling. Henry, the anguished plea pierced through the miasma enveloping me. I turned sharply, and before me stood a crude, splintered gate, partially ajar, almost reluctant to reveal what lay beyond. Urged by a mixture of sorrow and a throbbing sense of duty, I stepped closer. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air shivered, thick with impending doom. The landscape shifted dramatically, melding into a vision of a vibrant playground that felt both timeless and treacherous. Children played on rusted swings and slides, their laughter that of silvery bells that hung hauntingly in the air. But beneath their innocence lay a venomous undercurrent, a collective gaze with eyes too wide, watching me with an unsettling hunger. They miss you, a voice chimed from nowhere and everywhere at once, weaving through the laughter, inviting yet sinister. You left them behind. That I steeled myself, examining each tiny figure. They were the same creatures I'd seen before in the darkness, twisted by despair, their faces growth squally contorted. What do you want from me? I shouted, my voice a desperate plea lost amid their mindless merriment. Join us, play with us, they echoed, circling closer, taunting and enticing, eyes shining with an unholy light that captivated and terrified. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently beneath me, and the laughter transformed into a cacophony, overlapping shrieks of joy, morphing into something far more sinister. The swings began to creak, moving by invisible hands, and I staggered back as the playground dissolved into a swirling vortex of despair. The trees became twisted figures, limbs outstretched as if reaching for me, and the ground bubbled like molten stone, threatening to swallow everything in its smothering grip. I turned, but the exit was obscured, replaced by shadowy silhouettes that surged closer, a tide of darkness intent on reclaiming me. You can't escape, Henry. The voices shrieked, melding into a monstrous chorus of laughter that twisted my sanity. You belong with us. Frantic, my heart racing, I clawed my way through the shifting chaos, looking for anything resembling an escape. The haunting child's voice crept back into my mind, helped me, echoing insistently. I surged forward, searching, though I knew with every step that the darkness stalked me, ready to ensnare me in its dreadful grip. Turn back. A voice suddenly roared from the shadows, and for a breathless moment, I halted, caught in the crosshairs of temptation and dread. The ground beneath me split, revealing a pit of swirling darkness. You don't want to see what's down there, but the call to help was deafening. Enveloping me in swirling warmth amidst the cold tendrils of fear clutching at my mind. Henry, please, you can't leave me, you promised. The cry pierced my defenses. Me guilt, my history, my longing that my mind raced. What if I was the one trapped in the nightmare, bound by promises and regrets? Would I choose to save myself or the other? And in that crucial moment, as the very fabric of my reality was torn apart, I made my choice and leapt toward the void. With the darkness rushing in, I felt an arm grab my wrist, cold and merciless. A face horribly familiar emerged from the shadows, features contorted with rage yet laced with a hint of desperation. You're not getting away this time. The boy lunged forward, seeking to drag me back into the abyss. As my scream of terror erupted in the night, one single thought flooded my mind. If my nightmares sought to consume me, they had underestimated the lengths to which I would go to escape them. But the outcomes I faced now stretched far beyond mere survival, teetering on the edge of discovering what happens when light and dark finally confront each other and who in the end remains unscathed. The shadows deepened, wrapping around us like a living creature, pulsating with malevolence. I felt the boy's grip tighten, icy fingers digging into my skin, a chilling reminder of all I had left behind. His hollow eyes glowed with a psychotic fervor, illuminating the depths of sorrow and longing hidden beneath his rage. "Why did you leave us?" he demanded, shaking me as though to rattle loose the truth that lay in bed within me. The child's visage morphed, shifting in and out of his former self, a nightmare stitched together with scraps of innocence and despair. "You've come back for me, haven't you?" Didn't mean to," I stammered, fear clawing at my throat. "I came to help you." His laughter shivered through the air, sharp and mocking. "Help? You didn't help then, and you can't help now." With a snap, the world around us responded, birthing swirling shapes that morphed into anguished faces, specters of lost souls, longing for freedom. Each new form emanated sorrow, a gut-wrenching manifestation of their unfulfilled desires, swirling around us like vultures at a feast. "Join us," they screamed, their voices threading together into a merciless symphony. "There is no escape from this truth." I struggled, but his grip held firm, pulling me deeper into their realm, a dark, twisting labyrinth that pulsed with their shared pain. I could feel their regrets washing over me, a waystation of emotions pressing heavy upon my chest until I could barely breathe. Distorted visions flickered in the periphery of my vision, and the joyous day on the playground, flashes of laughter and the terrible moment I had chosen to run. "Your fear feeds us," the shadows hissed, a chorus of haunting pleas that blurred my vision, sending me spiraling into a chasm of guilt. I felt myself being dragged into an abyss of memories held captive. "Stop," I cried, summoning a strength I didn't know I possessed. All at once, a spark deep within ignited. "I won't be a part of this anymore." With a ferocious heave, I yanked my wrist free, stumbling backward. The boy lurched forward, eyes wide with shock as if he had never anticipated my defiance. "You can't leave me." From the darkness, a chilling howl rose, cleansing yet sinister, echoing through the landscape like a vengeful spirit awakening. Something struck the ground violently. A terrible earthquake that split the ground beneath us. Howling fissures gaping wide. From the darkness, tendrils of purplish fog snaked, latching onto everyone and everything, threatening to pull them into the abyss. "Henry," the boy shrieked, now rippling between forms child and specter. Innocence and wrath. Laughter rang out, a maddening round of voices crying out in unison as the playground warped back around us. The rusted swings twisted up into blurs of shadow. The slide slithering away. "It's too late for them," I bellowed, picking up speed as I ran, my heart pounding against the all-consuming dread that clawed at my back. Panic surged in my veins, fueling my legs as I raced deep into the swirling nightmare, the path ahead, undulating beneath layers of shifting shadows. But the voices persisted, growing louder, echoing the cries of despair, of betrayal, until the cacophony morphed into chants that reverberated through the very ground. I tread, "Come back, come back." I stumbled into a clearing of wretched souls tethered to the darkness. Faces I recognized from my childhood stared at me, mouths open in silent anguish, frozen in a tableau of grief. The boy stood at the edge, his form flickering between dimensions, his expression turning desperate, the sorrow morphing to madness. "Join us, Henry. No promises, no regrets," he shouted as a primal scream erupted from deep within me. A raw cry of both defiance and despair. Just then, a flash of blinding light erupted around me, collapsing the shadows into a singularity of light. I thought salvation had come, but instead the ground shook harder, and the shadows coiled around me once more, squeezing the essence of hope straight from my heart. I was swallowed by darkness, the weight of the oppressive grief and despair consuming me as a chilling realization swept over me. The boy was no mere specter. He was a manifestation of guilt, a remnant of my past. And in my quest to save him, I was sealing our fates together. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was his eyes now glistening with something new, unfathomable. "You'll never escape." And then the world fell silent, leaving me in a suffocating void where darkness reigns supreme, accompanied by the echo of lingering laughter, taunting me with promises of eternity. I felt myself falling deeper and deeper, lost to an abyss of endless night where nightmares could finally find their peace. But was it peace I desired, Or something far worse. I awoke again, gasping for breath as if emerging from drowning. I lay on a cold, hard surface, surrounded by a dim light filtering through twisted, heavy clouds. The air was thick with an insistent silence that rang just slightly louder than my own heartbeat, trembling in time with the creeping sense of dread crawling up my spine. Help me, Henry." The voice was hauntingly familiar, echoing through the void as it clawed at my sanity. I felt the boy's presence behind me, and I understood I was tethered to him, trapped in a cycle of torment, where nightmares slithered and groaned like restless phantoms. I bolted upright, shaking off the shadowy remnants that threatened to suffocate me. Before me lay a landscape unfathomably twisted and ever-shifting maze, reflecting my buried fears, raw regrets, and echoes of long-forgotten innocence. Distorted figures danced just out of reach, beckoning from behind warped mirrors and threaded pathways that splintered into darkness. Each face wore the hollow mask of my own anguished memories, taunting me as laughter rose from their non-existent lips, filling the air with something akin to madness. "Henry, don't leave me." The urgency snarled at me like a hound on a hunt, reminding me of all I had lost. A child's laughter, a friend's warmth, a promise made in the innocence of youth. As I staggered through the shadows, I felt the tug of the boy who had become my tormentor, my keeper. He was woven into the very fabric of this nightmarish reality, a grotesque embodiment of guilt and longing. "And no more," I cried, arms flailing, refusing to succumb to the cries that thrashed against my mind. "I'm done playing," but the voices grew louder, the cacophony of my past swirling around me like a maelstrom. Whispers rolled into furor. I felt eyes watching, scrutinizing each pang of guilt surged through me. A wretched imprint of choice and abandonment that marked my soul. That was the horror, the understanding that my past would never shatter, never settle. It would live alongside me, eternally feeding on my despair. As I stumbled through the fog, I caught sight of a flickering light ahead. Like a dying ember, I pushed towards it, driven by a desperate hope that perhaps this light might lead to an escape or an end. Each step became an act of defiance against the bullying whispers that beckoned me to surrender, to join them in a horrid embrace of shadows. But as I neared the light, it began to pulsate, revealing a twisted reflection of myself. Each flicker of light pulling at the seams of my existence, blurring the line between what was real and a mere nightmare. Within its glow stood the boy, a gnarled specter of every choice I'd made and a living vestige of childhood abandon. "Join us, Henry. This is where you belong," he hissed, his eyes gleaming with a maddening mix of longing and malice. And I screamed, fists clenching. "I refuse to be yours." Suddenly, the ground trembled violently as a monstrous crescendo erupted from the shadows behind him. And with it, a wave of my past surged forth. Faces of the lost, absurdly distorted, all beckoning me with twisted smiles, taunting me as I fought against the tempest that threatened to consume my resolve. "Help us, Henry, help us both," they cried, and I was caught in their chorus and snared by the weight of every scream echoing from the void that never ceased. That I faltered but forced myself forward, my legs pushing despite the pull of dread gnawing at my senses. The boy's laughter mixed with the cacophony of shadows, filling the air with a breathless torment that felt alive. It was no simple entrapment. It was an unveiling of my psyche's deepest fears. "Where are you going?" the boy squealed, anguish bursting from his lips as I approached the light, a portal swirling in overwhelming waves. "You can't leave me behind." "No," I replied, breath steady, despite the surges of despair tightening around my throat. "I am freeing myself. You cannot drag me down with you." With every ounce of determination surging through my veins, I pounced into the breaking light, desperate for the sweetness of reality I hoped still lingered beyond the dark veil. I shut my eyes against the brilliance, filling my lungs with a shattering gasp of freedom. But just as I felt hope enveloping me, an icy grip latched onto my ankle, pulling me back, dragging me down. "Don't let them in," echoed another familiar voice, cutting through the unfolding madness. I screamed out the word through my raw throat, the sheer desperation igniting the last embers of strength I had abandoned. The boy churned in laughter as I continued to plunge, but I held steadfast, pushing against the malevolence threatening to consume me whole. "Help me," came the cry again, transforming into a visceral horror that rippled through the cosmic fabric around us. I saw the faces of my past reflecting my darkest fears, images of guilt and regret mingling together, each one revealing their haunting truth in the jarring shift. I felt a rush of pain surge through my chest, sharp and sudden as shadows clawed at my heart. The darkness began to peel away, revealing a blazing light infused with warmth beyond anything I'd ever known. But then it came crashing down the moment when realization seized me, ripping the facade apart. I was not simply escaping. I had been the architect of my own nightmares. The darkness didn't just cloak me. It was a part of me failures, my fears, the choices that bound me here. They would never let go. In that final breath, everything collapsed. A torrent of realities converged, leaving me to reckon with the monstrous truth to battle against the shadows within. I stood on the precipice of acceptance, fully aware of my past. Its whispers forever lingering like phantoms. As the light began to consume the darkness, the boy's laughter faded into something more sinister. A chilling promise echoing along the edges of my resolve. When the light finally enveloped me completely, I braced for the end. Yet in that moment, I felt his voice slither through the gaps of existence like a serpent whispering deceit. "Don't worry, Henry, we'll always be together. This time, let them in forever." And in that haunting promise, as the world fell silent, I was left to ponder. Had I truly escaped, or had I merely embraced the horror?